Aegon the Conqueror had a dream warning him of the dangers lurking beyond the wall, that one day the ancient evil would rise again, and yet, could he have inadvertently sown the seeds for the destruction of the Night's Watch? There's more evidence than you might think. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire in depth, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. And this video is another collaboration with the wonderful History of Westeros. Please do check out their excellent podcast and YouTube channel. There's a link in the description. In a previous video, I set out why the Targaryens didn't better prepare Westeros for an attack from the north. It was a question worth asking because, as we now know, through House of the Dragon, but confirmed to originally come from George R. R. Martin himself, Aegon the Conqueror had a dream of such an attack that threatened all humanity, hence him invading in the first place. We don't know all the details of that dream, but it's clear that over the years that followed, the Targaryens didn't exactly prioritise the realm's northern defences. In that previous video, I explained why successive generations may not have done more. But this video goes further and asks whether Aegon the Conqueror himself may have inadvertently set all of that in motion. Was he fundamentally and ironically to blame for the state of the Night's Watch and the Wall by the time of A Song of Ice and Fire? When we first see the Watch through Jon's eyes, it is nothing like what he expects. Growing up, he had heard stories of nobility and honour, of steadfast service and bravery, of duty. Tyrion laughs at him for being so naive, and Tyrion's cynicism proves to be accurate. The stories Jon heard about the Night's Watch may have been true in the past, but they certainly weren't true any longer. Though he finds a few exceptions, there are not many men of character, nor are there many men at all. When Lord Commander Mormont took nearly every available fighting man beyond the wall for the so-called Great Ranging, it was only about 300 men, and there were about 1,000 total on the entirety of the wall. It's why they now garrison only 3 castles when they once manned 17. Compare that to when Aegon the Conqueror announced his intention to unite the 7 kingdoms into one. There were 10,000 fighting men on the wall, and so perhaps something like 30,000 in total, 30 times more. More than enough for those 17 castles, with plenty to spare for other tasks. And as far as we can tell, that was a typical number for them to have, and had been for thousands of years, yet it took less than 300 years for it to become how Jon found it. There were a couple of major events that culled those numbers. For example, the long winter after the Dance of the Dragons, which killed a third of their number, and the wildling raids at the same time, which killed many more, but on the whole it was a simple matter of the Night's Watch members dying at a quicker rate than they were being recruited. Because let's not forget that, unlike a nation or city-state, the population of the Night's Watch did not grow naturally, only when new recruits joined. And the life expectancy of a member of the Night's Watch, given the freezing cold winters and constant threat of wildling raids, was probably lower than that of the rest of the 7 kingdoms. In other words, this was a gradual decline, not something that can be pinned on a single war or catastrophe. In fact, wars and catastrophes had little to do with it. Ironically, the biggest factor of all was the opposite: peace. Aegon's priority was a unified realm. In House of the Dragon, this is one of the key aspects of that dream handed down to King Viserys, which is understandable. When Aegon decided on the conquest, he didn't merely see the future in his dream, he also saw, without dreams, that Westeros had been plagued by constant war for eons. Dawn versus the Stormlands, Dawn versus the Reach, the Iron Islands versus the Westlands, the Vale versus the North, the Riverlands versus everybody, including themselves. The list is unending. Of course, it was even worse when there were 100 kings and queens in Westeros instead of 7 or so, but regardless of the exact number of monarchs, there was a distinct pattern, and Aegon wanted to stop it and build a strong, united realm. So, although the conquest was arguably the largest war that Westeros had ever seen, pretty much no one took the black after losing, unlike in previous petty wars. Previously, although many of the highborn captured in a war would be ransomed back to their families, the especially politically dangerous, or perhaps those without the funds to pay a ransom, would find themselves heading to the wall. The winners get to banish some awkward opponents while looking magnanimous for not killing them, while the losers get to avoid death. It had been the way of things for longer than living memory. But that was when the losing side was a different kingdom. The King of the Reach doesn't care if the King of the Rock sends a few hundred Westermen to the wall. In fact, they'd probably quite like the idea. But the King of the Reach doesn't want to send his own subjects there. No king wants their population to shrink, and sending men to the wall is exactly that. Now, all of the 7 kingdoms were united under one ruler, and Aegon wasn't particularly interested in sending huge numbers of his own new subjects to the wall where they could no longer farm, do business, labour, father children, or otherwise be productive members of the new realm. If he wanted a strong realm, his incentive was not to send people to the wall. In other words, the countless wars between countless kings and queens and lords and ladies before Aegon's conquest meant a constant flow of manpower to the wall that ended when the conquest was complete. The new laws under Aegon and the Iron Throne made private wars between houses illegal. Defy that law, and you could face Balerion. From Aegon's perspective, this probably initially worked well. Other than his ongoing issues in Dorne, peace was maintained throughout the years of his reign. Going forward, under the dragons, wars became rarer and were often very small between a single lord or two, such as the Brackens and Blackwoods, who just can't seem to help themselves. The King's Peace cut the Night's Watch manpower supply down to a trickle. The loss of manpower then caused issues beyond the closure of castles. Brandon's Gift, the stretch of land owned by the Watch for their farms and fields, was no longer properly staffed or defended. This meant a reduction in food and coin, further compounding the existing problems, which led to an increased reliance on donations from houses around the realm, particularly the north. The Night's Watch went from being self-sufficient to begging for support. This reliance harmed the reputation of the Night's Watch, reducing the number of volunteers as the organisation lost some of its former prestige. Most outside the North could no doubt see that it was an organisation in decline, a decline that persisted for generations after the conquest. At which point, yes, we should acknowledge that the King's Peace was not absolute during the reign of the Targaryens. Wars still happened under the Targaryens, and often it was the Targaryens themselves who shattered it. Maegor versus Aegon the Uncrowned, for example, the Dance of the Dragons, the Blackfire rebellions, or even Robert's rebellion. When there were wars, they tended to be continent-spanning. Civil wars tend to be anything but small. Rather than 2 houses and their allies, it can involve the entire realm, feast and famine. When such wars end, the losing side must be dealt with strongly, if not harshly. Such is the nature of treason. In such cases, the manpower trickle turns into a flood, and on the wall, too many recruits all at once can actually cause problems of an entirely different sort. Imagine if Jon had arrived at the wall with hundreds or even thousands of others loyal to him at the same time. There are a host of practical issues. How could they all be trained, fed? It's cold up there. Do they have enough spare black cloaks to go around? But even more importantly, would they all get on? Or would damaging struggles for control break out? This isn't a purely academic thought experiment. It actually happened several times. For example, Bloodraven was sent to the wall for illegally executing Aenys Blackfire. When he took the black, so did Maester Aemon and many of Bloodraven's personal guard, the Raven's Teeth. As Hand of the King for 2 kings who oversaw multiple Blackfire rebellions, it's a safe bet that Bloodraven found many men on the wall who had been sent there by him. We don't have any details, but it's likely there was some bad blood there. There would have been men who fought for Bittersteel or Daemon Blackfire who would have absolutely hated Bloodraven, at the very least. We should ask, what good is a huge influx of manpower to the wall if so many of those new recruits hate each other, or worse, kill each other? Men are supposed to forgive and forget their past lives when taking the oath, but we know and have seen that this is easier said than done. Again, for example, when Jon Snow got to the wall, he found many survivors of Robert's rebellion, mostly those who fought for Aerys, i.e. the losing side, such as none other than Alistair Thorne himself. It's probably a big part of why Sir Alistair hated Jon Snow so much, because Ned Stark was a leader of the winning side, the side that sent Sir Alistair to the wall. To summarise, the Watch lost a major recruiting tool thanks to the King's Peace and the unification of Westeros, except for those times when there was a civil war and too many men were sent at once. Over time, this reduced the Watch's numbers to a state where it had to abandon castles and farms, leaving gaps in their defences that the wildlings could exploit by raiding, which further impoverished it, which in turn led to a significant loss of prestige, which reduced recruiting from noble houses. They were left begging for anyone. Some, mostly northern houses, still saw going to the wall as an honourable pursuit, but most did not. There's probably also a psychological point here about how real the supernatural threat from the north must have felt to people when there were dragons and magicians in the land, compared to later when even people like Tyrion could mock the idea of there even being monsters beyond the wall. But inevitably all this left the Night's Watch in a state where the overwhelming majority of recruits were the worst sort of men. They were literally begging to recruit people from the darkest and most secure dungeon in King's Landing. Such is the state it's in when Jon Snow arrives. Someone uniquely placed to observe a lot of this decline is Maester Aemon, who took the Black in around the year 233 AC. After Lord Commander Mormont's murder, he said this about the mutineers: "Thieves, cowards and killers, the lot of them. We should have seen it coming. The Watch is not what it was. Too few honest men to keep the rogues in line." Aemon is not exaggerating. They literally were thieves and killers before joining the Watch. The point is made succinctly and leaves no doubt. This isn't just a decline in the quantity of Brothers in Black, it is a decline in their quality as well. The Night's Watch can't defend the realm if it can't defend itself from itself. All of this is, of course, exacerbated by Aegon the Conqueror's apparent early decision to limit who he told his prophecy dream to. If he was the one who specified that it should only go from ruler to heir, as on the show Viserys seems to think the case, then it was an active decision to ensure that the lords of the land did not realise how important the defences to the north of the realm were. Quite an oversight, which led directly to the reduction in the quality and quantity of new recruits over time. As an aside, we should acknowledge the possibility that Aegon didn't restrict the wider Targaryen family from knowing about the prophecy. It's just that there weren't many of them at the time. Many fans assume that he must have told his sister wives, and probably Aenys, his heir, and that Visenya may have told Maegor, so maybe he told all the Targaryens in his immediate family, but not the wider lords of the land. Anyway, how could Aegon allow all this to happen? Did he not take notice? Or if he perhaps didn't think too much about the longer-term impact on the Night's Watch because he thought the attack from the north would happen in his lifetime, how did his descendants fail to see the importance of the Night's Watch? Well, perhaps all that is the case, but there is a simpler potential answer. If Aegon's dream told him that House Targaryen was the key to winning the War for the Dawn, then he might not have recognised the importance of the Night's Watch at all. He may have seen them as nothing more than an advance warning system, not a crucial front line of defence. To Aegon, he or his sons and daughters and their descendants and their dragons would win the war. In his dream, House Targaryen saves the world, not the Brothers in Black, so he didn't need to concern himself with them all that much at all. Which is to say, Aegon was quite possibly very much mistaken. We must remind ourselves that just because the dream came to Aegon doesn't mean that he understood it perfectly, or that it was 100% accurate. Again, we are reminded that prophecy and dreams are not always a full picture, and thus often not to be entirely trusted. There is no reason to think that even the version of the dream we heard Viserys give Rhaenyra on the show is the same as Aegon originally saw, as it seems not to have been recorded on paper anywhere. We don't know exactly what he saw, but we can see the impact it had on the Night's Watch. Luckily for everyone, Aegon the Conqueror's descendant Jon Snow is Lord Commander now, and his alliances with the Free Folk and Stannis have helped alleviate the manpower shortage somewhat. More than manpower, however, what he needs most is dragon power. He needs the help of Aegon the Conqueror's other descendant, Daenerys Targaryen, and her dragons. Perhaps then, if all goes well enough, the shortage will cease to matter, because the Night's Watch won't be needed at all. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, diving deep into the world of Ice and Fire, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.